and welcome to the Inside Out Experience. I am Coach Pepper Joy.
And I'm Coach PJ.
And tonight we are talking about social justice in relation to trauma recovery. And this is an important subject. It's very near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure it hits home for you in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
And we are going to be touching on, not just touching, but rather going through the last chapter of my book, REST, the Restorative Response System Theory. And the final chapter is titled Community Care. So what does that have to do with social justice? And furthermore, what do either of those have to do with trauma recovery? And that's what we're going to dive into tonight. So with that, I'll let you kind of get us started.
Okay. Well, I think it's important that we really recognize that everyone has a part to play in social justice. And because everyone has a right to play or a part to play in social justice, we all have a part to play in the trauma recovery of our communities and our communities at large.
Yes.
Let me explain what I mean. We were just having a conversation a few minutes ago about poverty, okay? And poverty is a real easy example to pick to broach this topic. And the reason that I say this is because we all know someone that either has been or is impoverished. We run across them every day. If you don't know them personally, you've seen them. You've seen people that are houseless. You've run across people that are struggling to make the ends meet or what have you. And if you're paying attention, you probably also have seen that people that occupy that space have been criminalized.
Yes.
Okay, so they not only have to deal with the poverty itself or the lack, they also have to deal with the stigma of not having enough. And, think about this, like when you were in, I don't know how much this happened when you were in school. Well, yeah, actually I do, because you told me about your childhood, but...
For the audience member that may have had a different experience.
Yeah. But, there were things like that kids, learn at an early age to look down on people that don't have as much as they do.
Yeah.
Like when I was a kid, they had a whole song. Like if the kids in the neighborhood or at school or whatever communal area you were occupying didn't like your sneakers, they had a whole ass song, okay? Bobos, they called them bobos, okay? Like a bobo is something that is not a name brand or a popular, I'll say, name brand sneaker. It's not the expensive shoe.
Right.
It's the cheap shoe. It's the shoe that, is nondescript or
it's my
whatever.
kids.
Might fall apart, quicker than the other one does.
Yes.
Because, they're not as high quality, allegedly. Okay. And we had a whole song, just to dance around with it, And, you look back at that now as an adult and you're like, what the hell were we thinking?
Mm-hmm.
It's like these other kids didn't have any control. Like, I didn't like the shoes that my parents bought me half the time. But no one ever teased me about them because they were nice shoes.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They might have said, oh, you wearing them roach stompers or something like that. But that was as far as it would go. It's like, okay, so my shoes are built to last. What do you want me to tell you? My father was into sensible fashion, if there's any such thing.
Something that doesn't go out of style quite as fast.
Right. It doesn't go out of style and that sort of thing. And he was preparing me for something that I wasn't ready to walk into yet. But nevertheless, that's a whole other story. But, we do things like this and we learn this and we carry it into our adulthood.
Yes.
And with that, carrying that into adulthood, we carry those attitudes, we carry those vibrations, we carry that mindset.
That conditioning and grooming.
And conditioning and programming into our adulthood. So along with your just, okay, let's just say that you've got person A over here who, again, has trouble making the ends meet, or they're houseless or what have you. They also have this stigma attached to that, and they're criminalized. Okay, I can't sleep on the bench.
Right.
I can't sleep in a camp.
They don't have access to mental health care.
They have no access to anything.
They can't get a job because they don't have an address.
Yeah, if you don't have an address, you can't get a job.
Yeah, they get penalized regularly if they try to use the address of the shelter with which they try to stay at.
Mm-hmm. It's extremely
can't vote.
Expensive.
It's expensive to be poor. There's so many, late fees, overdraft fees. Those things are like, this is what you get for not paying your bill on time. But if you don't have the money to pay that bill on time, what sense does it make that when you do finally have the means, that it costs you twice as much?
And we're talking about necessities. We're not talking about, people that are spending money on vacations and lavish vacations.
Right. Like you're late on your credit card payment versus being late versus not having that auto pay for your bank account.
Or even having transportation to get to work.
Yes.
Like, we just recently had a couple of it. We have 2 automobiles, and they're both in the shop right now.
Right.
They broke down within days of each other with similar problems, which is really wild. But
not similar bills, though.
Not similar bills. Yeah, that premium stuff costs a lot more. But nevertheless, it's like, but we know that there's a light at the end of that tunnel. Like, our cars are going to get fixed, and we're going to be able to pay for it and move on.
Right.
But it has limited us.
Right. Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And it makes us want to, makes us have to rearrange the resources that we do have to accommodate that situation.
Yep. That word resources, sorry, I'm going to hop on that word. So one of the things about trauma recovery is that we teach people how to resource themselves. And the reason community care is so important to me is because I believe that in learning how to resource ourselves, there is absolutely a collective need to be able to resource your community.
Right.
And I bring this up because resources are wealth. They're how you get out of survival. Right. Survival is scarcity, lack of resources, lack of ability to flow, and even accessibility, right? So that all that to say that when that word resourcing, you're gonna hear us use that a bit tonight.
But I wrote this down while we were getting prepared here, and that is that lack of social justice and even apathy concerning it is what's that word? is born of disconnection. And disconnection is what causes trauma to begin with.
It is the sign of trauma.
Yeah. It's
the number
one indicator of trauma is disconnection. And when we say disconnection, okay, let's go back to poverty. These people are disconnected from
society.
From community. I mean, how many times have you pulled up, and I'm not trying to shame anyone here, okay, please understand that, but how many times have you pulled up to a stop sign at the end of an off-ramp or street light at the end of an off-ramp off the highway, and there's that family nowadays. It used to be just a person.
Right.
Now we're seeing entire families sitting on the side of the road looking for help. Handouts and help.
Yeah.
And you're embarrassed. It triggers shame in you because hey, I only got what I need. You know what I mean?
But there's also the societal conditioning for the person that's not having to beg, that they should just go get a job.
Yeah.
There's things we've been taught.
They're just going to spend it on drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
And
there's
crap.
This crazy theory out there, and in some ways not so far-fetched, that homeless people make more money and they don't pay taxes because they do stand out there and beg 24/7 or what have you. And there's this whole underground homeless pretending community making money off of people who they feel shame and they give their money. And I want to, first of all, I don't want to get too deep into that because that could be a whole other live. But it's a system that has you groomed and conditioned into believing, or has one groomed into conditioned into believing that this individual who has a need and is going to a public space to ask for help and resources has an agenda. And I would challenge that where don't agendas exist? Where doesn't that happen? Especially in a capitalistic society as
everything
Western
is
society
transactional in our society.
Everything, and that so can you even have healthy community care when everything is a transactional but not necessarily reciprocal situation? That's a system that is created to create disconnect.
Bingo.
It others people. It enforces phobias and isms. And that's where this is why we want to talk about community care, because
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, that just brings me to the next thing that I had written down, and the only other thing that I had written down actually, which is that systems promote disconnection. And I'm sure that we can all think of one system that would forward the agenda of disconnection.
Yes.
So to me, okay, again, let me just back up a little bit. When I say systems, I mean things like racism. I mean things like capitalism. I mean, sorry guys, but yes. I mean things like, oh gosh, I'm blanking. Colonialism. Okay, and I mean the list goes on. All the isms, religion, others people. Okay, the religion that I grew up with was like, okay, you've got
socialism, communism.
These people here are better than these people here.
Yeah, anytime that steps in the space, and this is where I get very cautious about exclusivity.
Exclusivity is not something that is a natural outgrowth of humanity. Right. It's a system.
Yeah, we've evolved. It's just an evolved way of othering people.
Yeah, for sure. But those systems promote discrimination. Those systems promote disconnect. And that's what the thing is, okay? Because, I was a Teamster for a number of years and did, things with the Teamsters like organizing and such. And what I can tell you is that the way that employers or corporations will discourage their employees from wanting to vibe with a union is they start disconnecting the employees from each other.
Don't talk about how much you get paid.
Don't talk about how much you get paid. Don't talk about this. Don't do that. Oh, we'll give you $5 more if you'll just, keep this quiet.
Why do laws have to be made to tell your employer how to treat you nice at the bare minimum? Just bare minimum nice. Why do we have to have a minimum?
Because there's a system of greed in place. And that brings me to, another point, and that is that scarcity is a lie. Scarcity is an absolute lie. Elon Musk just spent $44 billion. A guy that pays no taxes spent $44 billion to buy a social media platform. And, what was it, a week or a month before that, he was talking to the UN about what he could do to end world hunger. Which, by the way, the price tag was less on that than what he spent for Twitter. But you got to ask yourself, why are we disconnected? We're disconnected, I believe, because of these systems that are in place to keep us off balance and not connected to each other. But then that begs the question: what is the agenda of the people that are seeking for us to be disconnected?
Yes. Because when you live in survival mode, you don't have the ability to use logic all the time.
No.
And if you had the ability to use logic all the time and not have to make decisions out of desperation, you'd make better decisions. And so when we talk about systems, this is how we spell that around here, by the way.
Right.
Because that's what it is. All systems are based they cause trauma. And I want to jump into, because this might turn into a series, but I want to jump into social justice as community care. Social justice is community care. And this is I'm going to read a little bit from the book right now. Protesting is a communal act. Mm-hmm. And its need is the unrest in society. Practicing civil liberties and collectively declaring this is what democracy looks like is an act of solidarity and care that currently serves us in surviving together. The day that the power systems that provoke the need for this form of community care is destroyed is the day of true freedom, equity, and restorative response systems theory, REST. Fighting for the lives of the innocent, being the voices of the voiceless, listening with more than the frame of mind as a news headline, demanding accountability where true crime and trauma has taken place, listening to survivors and not punishing them are all communal acts in the name of social justice and equity. Mm-hmm. As we've journeyed through understanding trauma, emotions, vibrations, shame, I hope that the application of the restorative response system theory that we'll be talking about going forward on a communal level brings you hope and perhaps a call. So one of the other things about community care that's important regarding trauma, regarding social justice, is the co-regulation. So co-regulation of the autonomic nervous system. Mm-hmm. So in this space, I can't tell you how many times I've walked into the room and I've been a little more activated, and you've been just like,
yeah.
You've asserted your autonomic nervous system and been like, yours is out of capacity.
Yeah, so one of us has to get out of here. Or you
Calm
gotta
down.
regulate. Yes.
Right? Other nervous systems and vibrations communicate safety and connection with others. And safety and connection is the cure for trauma.
Bingo.
So when engaging with a being that is displaying trauma, shame, or fear, it helps to acknowledge and honor what we observe. Validating the one who is feeling the most disconnected in a space may facilitate the ability for reconnection. Reframe, remind yourselves that, and others, what the truth is in compassion, courage, and curiosity. So when we hear people looking at someone who's in a space of desperation, you gave a great example earlier of the person asking for money on the street corner, and then the person who drives up to that space and automatically casts judgment or casts shame. It's because somewhere in them there's this disconnect. And so they create further disconnect between them and the being in need. And that's systematic, that is societal, that is conditioned, and that is groomed into all of us. And it creates this desire to weaponize what we believe as our truth and our faith against each other.
Yeah. Well, you know, and believe me when I tell you this, that, you know, this may not make a lot of sense to people that don't understand that we are all the same.
Yes.
We are all God pretending to be human beings.
Say that again.
We're all God pretending to be human beings. And what I mean by that is that we all have the same exact spark of life. We all have the same ability to reach intelligent consciousness. And intelligent consciousness is, you know, a high way of saying that, you know, that part of you that is you. the I am, the part of you that knows that I am.
Yeah.
Okay.
That is God. That is source.
That's all it is. And you know, and it does, and I don't know how that's lost on us, because if you just look at nature, you look at creation, and how can you look at creation and loathe differences? Creation is full of variety. And even in our sameness, there's variety.
Right.
Variety to the point where each individual, there are no carbon copies.
Right. And this is why we have started protesting the word equality.
Yeah.
And started pushing more for equity.
Equity. Because it serves us all.
Yes. Equity is how you get true equality. But to put everything across the board as the same is to create disconnect.
Yeah, agreed.
I'd like to talk a little bit about politics because that's a big part of social justice. And I'm going to read again from the book. I've skipped ahead a few pages. And I'm just going to read this through. And I want everyone, before we do that, I want everyone to take a deep breath. Because where we go next gets very intense really fast. And there are some of you that are going to be like, yes and amen. And there's others that's going to be like, she's a witch.
Whatever.
And I will not allow that to bother me at all. Okay, so I'm just going to take a deep breath. All right, and here we go. It is woefully irresponsible and unethical to hate politics. It is absolutely appropriate and ethical, however, to hate them as they stand now in present time. We've literally politicized our world to death. And it is important now to politicize her to life. It is time to decolonize the field of mental health and wellness. And one way of doing that is exercising your right to vote. Vote to enable the right to vote. Vote to decolonize the nations. Vote to make medical and mental health care accessible to all. Vote to pay teachers better. Vote for our children's mental health. Vote to give our restorative response system, that system that is responding to your trauma, a chance. When candidates act and behave from spaces of trauma and trauma infliction, vote them out. To vote is to resource your ability to resist traumatization and restore the community to a regulated, responsive collective. And if we learn to respond to each other and vote, not just for ourselves, but for our community with compassion, courage, and curiosity, and tap into our restorative response system, that, in my opinion, is the revolution that will not be televised. All right. One of the other community care issues that I want to talk about under this umbrella of social justice is decriminalization. And there's a few things that I believe that as a community, we can support decriminalizing. And when we talk about criminalization, we can decriminalize homelessness. That would be a good start. We should totally decriminalize nature. But also, we should decriminalize people's autonomy and civil liberties.
Right on.
And in one of the ways that I believe we can do this is in the decriminalization of sex work. So while we're on the topic of voting, there's a deeper truth about what else voting is. It's a right. It's an exercise in autonomy, and it is important to protect it. It is also community care. We would benefit greatly to decriminalize sex work. And I want to tell anybody in this space right now that I know I'm coming intensely at you, and I know that your window of capacity is going, wait a second, I'm out. And I want to ask you to just pause. Just let what I'm reading right now to you land and sit in compassion and sit in curiosity. And with that, allow my courage to encourage your courage. Okay? So even if only as a means to combat human trafficking and restore dignities to individuals of the oldest profession in history, it's worth voting to decriminalize sex work. One need not be a buyer or a seller in the industry to recognize that the way we treat sex workers as though they're consensual skilled labor as a criminal act is wrong. People deserve their civil liberties and autonomy. To give of one's body in labor for the purpose of income is literally every job in existence ever. The shame in it should not be on the worker, but rather the capitalistic demand of labor. We can have an evolved society that understands the difference between morality and abuse policing. But how is this community care? I'd like to hit you with reframing and understanding what your idea of sex work is. So everyone thinks prostitute, everyone thinks sexual degenerates, everyone thinks sinner, everyone other, it's automatic othering.
Yep.
Pops up here, okay? And I would like to extend space for a group of people who desperately deserve dignity and decriminalization. Sex work is work, and it's the oldest profession in existence today. Sex work is a professional, acceptable way of humans engaging with shame for therapeutic and, yes, restorative responses. Ask yourself, why is sex work considered wrong? It's about morality for yourself or control of others.
It's always about control.
Are we as a society perhaps conditioned to not know the difference? Do you know the difference between consensual sex work and human trafficking? Because they aren't one and the same. The short answer is when force, fraud, and coercion are used, it is no longer consensual work. And that is true in any career. It's why we have labor unions.
And labor laws.
And labor laws. Do you realize that if sex workers are all trafficking survivors, that criminalizing them is punishing victims? What about the sex worker who was a former trafficking survivor? Are they not allowed to choose what they know and have survived with to make a living? And this is where it gets hard for coaches sometimes, because when you've been conditioned on religion and morality, and you don't see this as a valuable asset in any way, shape, or form for yourself, it's hard to see how it can benefit someone who's even been a victim of an adjacent system.
I mean, sex workers helped the Industrial Revolution in ways that are not even touched upon in our history, in the teaching of our history. And, you know, this is another thing that burns me up about, you know, how we frame our education. Because if you think, okay, when the Western expansion was happening, okay, consider this. You've got all these men from somewhere else moving themselves, their single selves, to work camps and all these other things, whether it was the railroad or the coal mines or whatever it was. Who do you think was satisfying those men's sexual needs? And I do use the word needs. They weren't screwing each other.
And it's important to recognize that sex it's a part of life. Everyone at some point has an encounter. And sometimes that encounter is damaging and sometimes it's healing, and it's really about, was consent and was autonomy present? And while I'm sure it's everyone's heart's desire that we all live our best life and not need sex work, there is a need for it.
Yeah.
And there's no point in being shameful about it. There's no point in condemning about it.
Well, think about a handicapped person. Okay.
They're marginalized enough.
Yeah.
Do they really not deserve to have someone in their life that can take care of their sexual need? It's important. It's a part of health.
It's organic. It's within us to to have those desires.
And here's the other thing. When you consider people living their best life and or whatever you think that should look like, what it looks like for anyone other than yourself is not up to you.
It's none of your business.
And I want to also offer up that, do you possibly feel disdain for sex workers? And if so, is it because of a personal experience?
Probably not.
Because that might mean shame is present. And when you're operating from shame or you're operating from trauma, you're not operating in your authentic self, and you're not operating with compassion, courage, and curiosity.
Yeah, because most of us, and I'll say this because I have not always been on this side of this issue. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, as of even, 3-4 years ago, I was not on this side of this issue. But it was all because of programming. Mm-hmm. I hadn't really considered anything. It's just I've been told that this is bad, and what did I bring up? I brought up public health. Absolute nonsense.
The World Health Organization, and I know some people find that to be a joke these days, but they've already done studies on where it's been decriminalized, and it lowers domestic violence. It lowers STD rates because when sex work is decriminalized, now sex workers have access to healthcare, and they have access to, they can call the police because they're not going to be criminalized for doing so. And I want to ask you, can you see how shame is at play and might be clouding your ability to separate your emotional state and societal conditioning from the facts? I mean, have you considered that labeling it corruption might be dangerous and harmful? Why has criminalizing sex work not worked to cure its seeming need in society? Why is that? And if you label people as sinners or with unkindness, do you realize that that is acting in disconnection, othering, and shaming? And that is not who did Jesus hang out with?
Prostitutes, sinners, tax collectors, brutes. According to the Bible.
Interesting. Is it possible that while your moral stance on sex work may not align with its consumption or function, it's okay to support the people in it? Attack ideas and not people?
Yeah.
In sex work, there are individuals who know nothing else, and there are people who deserve dignity and compassion. Do they not? In the sex work industry, there are students trying to avoid debt. Perhaps we could also raise the issue of undebting and decolonizing education. There are mothers trying to feed their babies and put them through college. Perhaps universal health care, and again, that education thing would be helpful.
Yeah.
In sex work, there are professionals helping survivors of sexual abuse understand their sexuality and heal from their wounds. Mm-hmm. Do survivors of sexual abuse not deserve dignity, professionalism, and healing in their sex life? And sure, there are other modalities for attempting healing. However, recovery and restoration must be survivor-led. And that's where, as coaches, we're going to do that all the time. Survivor-led recovery. How people choose to use their bodies for the purpose of labor and healing is up to them. Not you or your preferred belief systems. In the sex work industry, disabled individuals, as you spoke about, on the consumer side are treated with equity. They are treated with compassion in seeking services. Do people with different capacities not deserve to have enjoyable professional care? And where do you stand on the issue and topic? Wherever you stand is okay, but I encourage you to pause and just sit with the things we've spoken about here today.
And just consider something other than yourself and your own sensibilities, no matter where they come from.
Yep. I'm going to skip ahead, I think. I'll read this one more. If one truly desires to be compassionate, courageous and curious, they perhaps choose to set our children and victims of human trafficking free by decriminalizing the profession and the people that far too many wars have started and ended over. So that's all I want to speak to on decriminalizing sex work tonight. We've talked about attacking, again, those ideas, attacking systems, attacking colonized psychology, which is why the need for trauma recovery coaches has even come up, because when it comes to trauma and the treatment of it, because it needs to be safe and survivor-led as well as very individualized, that steps out of the scope of therapy and psychology. And while those are absolutely important parts of mental health care and community and healing, they aren't always the answer for everyone. And so I say all that to say that I would implore all of us to really reconsider the conditioning we have around hot button issues such as sex work and decriminalizing it. And I'll say one more thing about that, and then I want to step over into reform, and that is that why decrim versus legalization? And that is this. Legalization, when you look at, in particular, the cannabis industry, legalization is great if you need to regulate things. But
like pollution,
like how we process things, and it's interesting how even in that we tend to politicize and ruin things with legalization. Because then you create these systems that people can't break out of, and then creativity can't happen and connection can't happen. And so legalization and the regulating of human bodies is not conducive to autonomy, safety, or connection. And that is where we're coming from on this particular issue. So with that, I want to also step into the community care of reform. So this is one that everyone automatically thinks. What did you automatically think when I said the word reform, honey?
The first thing I thought of when you said reform is why bother? And I'll tell you why.
Okay, you get spicy now. I have my moment.
Well, I'll tell you why. From my perspective, to reform is to fix, okay? Or the way that, society sees that word.
Right.
Okay, we're gonna take this thing that was shaped like this and we're gonna make it like this. It's still a pencil.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? And as far as I'm concerned, all of these systems that we've been talking about, whether they be capitalism, racism, all the isms, all the othering apparatus, if you will, just need to be thrown out. And we need to start frickin' over and start recognizing each other and each other's humanity and each other's divinity, okay? And say, hey, it's equity, all right? My opinion is not worth any more than yours is, okay? But more with a focus on greater good than it is on the 1% and what they want and what they need to control us, because that's what those systems are all about, control. And what they do is they teach us to control, okay? Even in parenting, like I've got 5 children and every one of them has a different story about the kind of father that I am, because they're individuals, and they also, the ones that came later have had the benefit of what I've learned from the one before. Okay? And what I've learned going through this is as much as I want the best for my children, every one of them, it's not my problem to control them.
Right.
It is my responsibility to care for them and to keep them safe and all those other things. But we do things out of a sense of duty, and that's toxic.
Yeah.
And controlling. We were just watching this show, this TV show on HBO, The Gilded Age. And it's all these wealthy socialites in New York City, and they're just running around puppeting their children, and they're dangling the carrot of a fortune, a literal fortune that they've grown up with, this entitled life. And unless they do what mom and dad want them to do, that all goes away.
Right. I walked away from a promised inherited situation
Because of control.
because of control. I just refuse it. I just flat out refuse it. I'd rather create my own wealth. I'd rather create my own actual sustainable. And that's the other thing. Systems that don't sustain themselves, that's a broken one.
Bingo.
Systems are supposed to be designed to be self-sustaining. And where that doesn't work is when it requires it be fed.
Agreed.
And so when we talk about it, I won't use this inflammatory one yet. Sometimes it is appropriate to reform a system. Sometimes. However, if we wish to really provoke change, we would benefit in challenging ourselves to understanding deconstruction and destruction when it comes to this matter. Because you cannot reform things that were built on foundations of capitalism, colonization, shame, and even religion. These things are destructive. I am not attacking faith. I am absolutely attacking the system of religion. Because I know that can be very, that's sometimes all a person can hear. So to be clear, I am unapologetically attacking colonization, white supremacy, patriarchy, transphobia, homophobia, and any other ism or obia systems that allow exile of people based on anything but their danger factor.
Bingo.
Because unfortunately, it is often misunderstood that morality cannot be accepting of amorality. I challenge our curiosity to consider thinking of society being amoral as the balance of justice or equity in individual moralities or immoralities intersecting. Okay, and consider also if your morals require you to vote between differing toxicities. There was an election in the last decade where it felt like we were voting for the lesser of two evils.
And?
Just to say.
Just one?
Just,
Oh, okay.
a system.
I guess that's a matter of perspective.
When we, nope. When we share conspiracies, news, chaos, or distractions from truth and restoration, perhaps that's not morality at all. If it is fear-mongering, shaming, and hatefulness from within being projected outwardly, be mindful of that. Because anytime, one of the biggest things about religion and politics is that it's all about casting shame. It's all about casting fear. It's all fear-mongering, and it's hatefulness, and it's projected from inside. And here's the thing about it: when we participate in those things, we are perpetuating hatefulness against ourselves.
Yeah, we're feeding that energy.
I mean, it's literally true that if I don't treat you with kindness and I don't hold space for you, that I'm being ugly to me too.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. It really is a fact. And that's this is why community care. Because community care also kind of grows you up. And it makes you really recognize that I need you.
Mm-hmm.
You need me. Much as we might feel disconnected right now, I am because you are, and that's our connection. And I would hope that how I vote doesn't other you in a way that's harmful to you. It's okay sometimes for shame to be present in a space when it's being used as the shepherd's staff, and when it's being used to bring in that one of the 99, when it's being used to bring into a space safety and connection. Shame gets weaponized and creates disconnection, and that is where systems get born. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's just like the show you're talking about, that hierarchy, that control is the enemy of connection.
It's the antithesis.
It's the antithesis. How many times have we thought we were loving our child with punishment? Mm-hmm. And we were just controlling them.
It's just about control.
And therefore creating disconnection between us and our babies.
Yeah. And for everybody that's sitting there right now saying to yourself, well, then what am I supposed to do? come up with a new idea. I mean, is that all you have in your bag? Is that the only way that you're connected to your child is through a threat? Because if it is, you've got a lot of work to do on yourself.
Yeah, I can't tell you how, for me with our son Zion, the way I've had to grow up and learn to be a mother that was connecting and not controlling, it has been the most beautiful and painful process.
It's a journey.
And you know, I remember when I was growing up that it was talked about they didn't know how to raise me without breaking my spirit, was the conversation. And it wasn't that was their desire, but they didn't know how to operate outside of control.
And that's something that happens in Black families.
I think it happens in every family too.
Well, it's a difference though.
I'm sure.
And the difference is that we feel like we need to control for safety reasons. For reasons of safety. Like we were talking about haircuts the other day because our son's hair gets on our nerves, just to be perfectly honest with you. But he wears it real long and all that. And that doesn't get on our nerves. What gets on our nerves is he doesn't take care of it. Okay, just to be clear. I could care less how he wears his hair. But I remember growing up not being able to get certain styles of haircut or whatever.
Right.
Again, just like sneakers.
It's a form of self-expression.
Okay? It's a form of self-expression that I was not allowed to partake in because my father didn't feel that it was safe for me to look a certain way.
Yeah,
and he was correct.
He was right. Yep.
So that's what I mean when I specify for black and brown people,
right,
that there's a big difference, okay, in why we might want to control our kids. Not always, it's not exclusive, but it is a difference that we share.
There's a duality too in that necessary safety and where it goes into fear mongering.
Yeah.
Because I'll say that I can speak for religious families. We really would benefit greatly to challenge the idea that we need to control to save their soul.
Yeah.
Because we can't save their soul. We can't control that. And so I want to challenge that idea that if you are moving into a space of control, and you're moving from necessary safety and into control because of fear mongering, you've definitely created disconnection.
Yep.
And it's where you're going to feel like your child is rebelling against you because you created a disconnection. So Rebecca said she's intent equals safety. I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
I want to have a deeper conversation with you about that later. Okay, so again, if fear-mongering, shaming, and hatefulness from within are being projected outwardly, understanding this will help us rise to find a more solid resolve from broken and unnecessary systems. So I'm not going to go any further into, because we can talk about more hot button topics on this, but I do want to speak to deconstructing of toxicity. That would be any time that toxicity has stepped into the space, deconstruction is necessary, and deconstruction is not reforming.
Right.
And that needs to be made very clear. When systems are designed to work a certain way, you can't reform that. Like, it's especially when it comes to criminalizing homelessness, criminalizing sex workers, criminalizing nature. Those systems are
criminalizing skin color.
Systems, capitalism, it's toxicity. You can't reform that. You can't make that control better. You can only deconstruct it and recreate connection.
That's right.
So we've been going hard, and I think that.
Well, can I just speak to the vote real quick?
Yes.
Okay,
please.
because I really think that this is important. Try this. okay? Because I know that most of us don't have the will to do what needs to be done with our systems, and that is to tear them down.
Well, because
okay?
it would be an act of community care. It will take a collective of us to do that.
It would take most of us to do it. And for whatever reason, because people aren't awake to these ideas or whatever the case might be, they're tired, they're asleep, whatever the
Or
case.
they're part of the system.
Or they're part of it, okay, and they're benefiting from it, so they're happy in it.
And some are trapped in it.
And some are trapped, okay? But think about it this way. When you're voting, okay, because we're going to keep doing that, I guess, but when you're voting, talk to your children.
Yeah, if you have the privilege to vote.
Yeah. Talk to your kids about what they want, because what you're voting for is control. Okay, and that's what I spent most of my adult life voting for, was more and more control. Okay, whether it was from my side, the side I was on to be in control, or the other side to be in control. Forget that. Your kids are going to have to live with your decisions.
Yep.
Talk to them about what to vote for. Discuss with them the candidates that you're voting amongst, or what have you, and find out what they have to say about it, because ultimately they're the ones that have to live with that decision.
Right. I want to go a step further before we close, and I want to also challenge us to recognize that if we don't heal our trauma, we will vote in survival. And that's what you're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
If we start to heal, because one of the big things that we see families disconnecting over these hot button issues. And they're not disconnecting because they shouldn't. I don't want to say that again. When people disconnect, when families disconnect, because of politics, because of social justice issues, because of systems, they should.
Yep.
Because it's that disconnecting from toxicity, it's that rejection of toxicity, and that is the first step in the revolution.
Well, I'll just add this to that, okay? And that is that if the politic or the issue or whatever the case might be is disconnecting you, you were disconnected before that.
True.
You weren't connected to begin with.
And all that happened was the reckoning that needed to.
Yeah, it was just revealed.
Right? And so if you find yourself, and this is where it's hard because people think, oh, I shouldn't, let's throw this out there again. And that is, it is not blood runs thicker than water.
Oh, Lord.
Okay? Because I got beat up with that one a lot. It is blood of the covenant runs thicker than water of the womb. You can throw a Bible verse in there. A prophet is not without what?
Honor.
Honor. In his what?
Own home.
In his own freaking home. And it's very, and I say all that to say that what we have seen in the sphere of politics and social justice and the emotional eruptions and the emotionally charged and triggering issues that come up, they're necessary to address from the space of trauma recovery, because if we're not healing individually, then we can't come together in a healing space, in a truly healing space, because we'll disconnect over control. And when that happens, we're just perpetuating this cycle. And I want us to really sit with and wrestle with that, because I desire for us all to learn how to increase our window of capacity on things that challenge your conditioning, your programming, your grooming from systems and society. And start operating with yourself with compassion and courage and curiosity, and like, why am I going to vote this way? Why am I listening to that talking head? Why is that the area that I consume my news or information from?
Or
and
why does this trigger me?
Why does it trigger me? Why does it trigger me that your opinion is different from mine? Unless it's dangerous to me. And is it dangerous to me, or is it dangerous to another system I want? Like, is your idea of something dangerous to my religion?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's not the same thing as being dangerous to you, the individual.
Correct.
And that is something we could go on and on and on about, but I really want to respect the time of our people who have come up here and shared this space with us. And I know we've been intense, and I know we've really gone to some hot button issues, but with our compassion comes passion. And the way that we presented these things here tonight, I believe is the most direct and compassionate way and most courageous way that we can address these issues from where we sit and with our platform.
Yeah.
And so I do want to thank you, and I want to thank you for allowing that to take place in this space today, because there is never going to be another moment like this. And this is that disconnecting in families, that disconnecting in different social settings, all these disconnections over social justice, over political things, are necessary to the revolution that is about to happen. And if you don't believe me, just sit silently and watch, because it's happening. It's happening as evidenced by the fact that this live is happening right now. So thank you all again, and would you, Coach PJ, lead us out with an exercise to help us get our autonomic nervous system settled back into a more regulated and restored state, and allow us to, please send us. I'm glad that you posted in the comments below. You're going to see our email address. We'd love to hear from you. We would love to sit with you in that space of discomfort to create connection, and with compassion.
And that is exactly why I'm not going to do a somatic exercise, but what I will tell you to do, because I want you to sit with the discomfort. Okay, if you've made it this far, I want you to sit with that discomfort and feel it. Okay, I need you to feel it. All right?
You can't
and this
feel
isn't me.
What you don't feel.
That's right. You can't heal it if you don't feel it. So what I will say is, if you're activated or what have you, do some breathing, sit quietly, and try to notice or email us, text me, whatever the case might be, or message me on the Facebook or what have you, and I'd be happy to help you through that. But I do feel like if you're uncomfortable right now, you're supposed to be.
Yes, discomfort is not an attack.
No.
And it doesn't destroy you, and it doesn't threaten you.
So if you have any questions, I put our email address in the chat. If you want to refer this live to somebody else that doesn't have Facebook, I put our YouTube channel link in the chat. I'll try to have it up within the next couple days on YouTube. Sometimes that's a little laborious, but I think I'll have time to get it out tomorrow.
Yes.
But nevertheless, we appreciate you all, and we love you.
Yes.
And
you deserve healing.
You deserve to heal.
If nothing else, if you take nothing else from today, that is that even if you feel injured by this live, you deserve healing. And I hope you will reach out to adding us as the addition of your community, or whatever your community is, for support and health and healing. And we really greatly appreciate it. We love everybody. We hold space for all of you. And it is our heart's desire that you will go forth and live your best life.
From the inside out. Namaste. Holla!